Now, according to the 2023 Trafficking in Persons report from the U.S. Department of State, South African government does not fully meet the minimum standards for the elimination of trafficking, but it is making significant efforts to do so. Last year, the Human Sciences Research Council estimated that a possible 250,000 people have fallen victim to human trafficking in South Africa alone. On Sunday, police rescued 90 undocumented Ethiopian nationals who were allegedly being kept against their will and under inhumane conditions. Now, is enough being done to tackle human trafficking in South Africa? To help us discuss this matter, we joined virtually now by Gyan Dwarika, who's the Deputy Director of Child Exploitation at the National Department of Social Development. And unfortunately, Dr. Marcel not with us yet. But Gyan, thank you so much for your time and welcome to Morning Live.
Good morning, Sakina, and to your viewers as well.
Perhaps the question, Gyan, that many are asking is why is South Africa such an attractive destination for transnational victims from the region especially?
I think, Sakina, if we had to look at what is happening in our neighboring countries in terms of poverty, issues of crime, issues of genocide, we find that poverty, there's a push and pull factor. So we find that I focus specifically on child trafficking, and you find that children are now moving to South Africa, and parents are with the belief that life is better in South Africa. Hence, children are sent to South Africa for the purposes of having a better life. However, you have traffickers that also then inform parents that there's always a better education, better life in South Africa, and parents are under the pretext of believing so, then send their children to South Africa. We have an incidence of young girls coming to South Africa for the purposes of domestic servitude. However, there's a high incidence of sexual exploitation and labor exploitation.
So, Ms. Dwarika, looking at those different forms of trafficking, is there enough to suggest that human trafficking in South Africa is actually on the uptick at the moment as we speak?
Well, in terms of reporting, I think that's where our challenge is, where we don't, victims themselves are not reporting. With the fear of the reprisal of their families being attacked, families being maimed, families being killed. So persons don't actually come for assistance. However, through other methods, we find that children are trafficked, as I indicated to you, for purposes of labor exploitation, sexual exploitation. So when the issues manifest, it's manifesting in other forms, but not specifically with the form of trafficking. So investigations will then outline exactly what is the problem. So when you investigate a matter, then you realize, well, you look at the issues of trafficking and the process of trafficking, and then you realize that this particular child has been trafficked through different processes, like, for example, the recruitment, the transportation, and the delivery of the child to a particular trafficker in South Africa. So if, as I said, investigation then reveals that these children are trafficked, you also have children that are brought to South Africa for the purposes of forced child marriages, and they are living with much older men. And as I indicated to you, on the pretext, parents believe that children are coming to South Africa for a better life. However, children are brought here for those issues of exploitation.
So just looking at how children actually land on these shores, because we know how strict South Africa is. You, for example, cannot take your child out of the country without an unabridged birth certificate. So in terms of children coming into the country as well, you know, where are those loopholes? Because children especially, one would imagine our border management officials would be more vigilant when processing those.
Yes, most definitely. However, you do have persons who then are implicated in illegal activities. However, the Border Management Agency is doing an excellent job. Ever since the implementation of the Border Management Agency, we are then receiving cases of children that are brought across borders via taxis, via trucks and whatever. But I must indicate that the Border Management Agency is working in an excellent manner, and there is collaboration between all departments during the festive periods, the Easter period. All departments work together, and as I said, the collaboration assists in actually reducing the incidence of children coming into the country illegally.
So to that point, and you're correct, I remember towards the end of last year, there were at least two very prominent cases that were reported by the Border Management Authority of intercepting groups of children that were coming in from Zimbabwe. But what has happened to those children, Gyan? Do we know?
Yes, look, the Department of Social Development and the non-governmental organizations, we work together in terms of rendering services to these children. So at the National Department of Social Development, we do have the International Social Services Unit. When we find these children, the International Social Services Directorate then would contact the social services unit in the country of origin to establish the whereabouts of family tracing. And then we would place these children in South Africa in temporary safe care or in alternative care at a child and youth care center or with persons that are responsible to take care of these children. So while this investigation is going on in terms of family tracing, children are then dealt with in terms of the South African legislation and placed, as I indicated to you, in alternative care or temporary safe care. And they would receive the basket of services, the core package of services in terms of trauma debriefing, counseling, and preparing them for a repatriation process back to country of origin.
So have all those children been repatriated? Have their parents been traced? You know, and if of those who haven't, you know, what happens to them?
Well, those children were repatriated to country of origin, but those children that we cannot trace families, they remain in the country. Remember, every child is important, and every child has to be identified as a child in need of care and protection according to the Children's Act. If they do not have any parental care, or if there's nobody that's identified to care for them. So those children are then taken through a court process and placed, as I indicated to you, in a child and youth care center, which is formerly known as children's homes. And they are placed there and provided with the necessary care. The social worker within the child and youth care center will assist the child in, again, trying to establish contact with families back home. And if that's not available, then the child will remain within our system, and all the necessary services are rendered, including healthcare, education, and other services that are required by the child.
So, Gyan, in terms of South African children that are trafficked, do we know what happens to them in the main? Do they generally get trafficked within the country, or do we know of some avenues that would actually secure their trafficking to other countries outside of South Africa?
We haven't had incidents of children, South African children trafficked to other countries. However, we do have intra-trafficking, where we find that children in groups are moved from one province to the next, and basically for labor exploitation. And these children are then returned to their families, and the necessary services are rendered to the children, including their families. And as indicated, most of the children move to one province from one province to the next for the purposes of securing a job, or sometimes they are exploited in the labor field, in the agriculture, in the fishing industry, in the mining industry. So these children are, as I indicated to you, are assisted to return back to their families, and families are then provided with options if they have financial problems to then access the social assistance grants. And that's how families continue. And then there's supervision of these children to ensure that they're not re-trafficked to another province. And so it takes a lot of supervision and monitoring of these cases.
Gyan, the country obviously has comprehensive anti-trafficking legislation in place and a national policy framework to guide its implementation. So what is the problem? Where are we lacking? You know, what are the barriers then to successfully addressing this heinous crime?
Yes, of course, we have the Prevention and Combating of Trafficking in Persons Act, which is the responsibility of the Department of Justice in the implementation of the Act. However, when we have children that are trafficked, we need to understand that these children are then dealt with in terms of the Children's Act as they are identified as a child in need of care and protection. So the services are available, but I think, as I indicated to you, the major pull and push factor is the issue of poverty, the issue of low levels of education, the issue of deceit. As I indicated to you, parents are being deceived that their children will have a better life in another province, in another country. So these are basically the reasons why children are trafficked. And as much as there's awareness raising, there's education and awareness raising, the department has the 365 Days Child Protection Program of Action, and we always include the issues of child trafficking. We also, Sakina, we also need to look at the issue of children being recruited online. So when we look at the online issue, we also need to look at the offline consequences. So as indicated, they will be recruited online and then meet persons offline, and then they are trafficked, as I said, for the purposes of having a better life, better education. But as I said, this is all done under deceit.
Oh, Gyan, thank you so much. I think so important that we raise awareness. We cannot overemphasize how important it is for everyone to stay vigilant around this matter. Gyan Dwarika, the Deputy Director for Child Exploitation at the National Department of Social Development, speaking to us there, talking about children and that as a focus in human trafficking.